My wife cheated on me with our accountant, stole $250, $0 from our joint account to buy a house with him, and now she's trying to claim half of our $1.2 million inheritance in the divorce. I never saw these betrayals coming. I never thought I'd be the guy whose wife would cheat on him, steal $250,000, and then try to claim half of our inheritance like she was entitled to it all along. Honestly, I always believed I had a good marriage, steady, predictable, comfortable. But that all changed in the blink of an eye, and looking back, I see the signs now, tiny clues that I brushed off or dismissed because I didn't want to face the truth. It started subtly. My wife always had this habit of being a little bitchy when she was stressed or annoyed. I thought it was just her personality. She's always been a bit sharp-tongued, quick to snap at small things. But then her mood swings got worse, and she started avoiding me more than usual. She'd cancel plans last minute, saying she was busy or tired, and I bought it because she works a demanding job. Still, I noticed her phone was always locked now, and she'd take calls in the bathroom or hide her screen when I entered the room. Nothing concrete, just enough to make me suspicious. Then came the money stuff. I'm not a naive guy. I handle our finances, and I know where every dollar goes. We have a joint account, and we've got a pretty comfortable life, mostly because of my inheritance from my grandparents and some smart investments I made early on. But about 3 months ago, I noticed a strange transfer 50-0 out of our account. Not a big deal on its own, but it was unusual because was never involved in the financials. I asked her about it, and she brushed it off, said it was for some emergency she was handling for work. I didn't press her because she's always been good at lying when she wants to. But then, the bigger red flags started piling up. I kept checking the bank statements, and I saw more suspicious transactions, smaller but frequent, and always around the same time as her emergencies. I also noticed she was spending a lot more on jewelry and clothes, things I never remembered her buying before. She claimed she was just treating herself, but I knew she was lying. She's not that kind of person. She's not overly materialistic. She's more about saving and planning for the future. One night I came home early from work because I wasn't feeling well. As I stepped into the house, I saw her phone on the kitchen table buzzing nonstop. I glanced at it out of curiosity and saw a string of messages from someone named Alex, the kind of messages that make your stomach drop. Flirty, suggestive, talking about meeting up. I froze, trying not to freak out. I knew then this wasn't just about money or stress. Was cheating on me. I could feel my blood boiling, but I kept my composure. I didn't confront her right away. I wanted to catch her in the act or get more proof. I started digging into her phone, her emails, her social media. And what I found was worse than I imagined. She'd been seeing this Alex behind my back for months. They'd been meeting in hotels, sneaking around, and she even told him she was separated from me, claimed I was cold and distant, that I didn't satisfy her anymore. That's when I realized she'd been planning her escape, or so I thought. But what really hit me like a punch in the gut was the financial part. I discovered that she'd stolen a huge chunk of money, 250-0, out of our joint account. It was supposed to be for our future, for the house we'd been planning to buy. Instead, she used it to buy a house with this guy Alex. I found out because I tracked the transfer, and it was sent to an account in her name but linked to the property she bought. She lied about everything, said she was paying off debts, that she needed money for an investment, and that I was overreacting. When I confronted her with all this, she went ballistic. Everything, called me paranoid or insecure, accused me of snooping and ruining her life. She told me she was tired of pretending, that I was never enough, and that she deserved better. She spun this web of lies about how she was just trying to find herself, that she never wanted to hurt me, that she was just looking for happiness. That was her excuse, always the victim, never the villain. I felt numb. Part of me wanted to believe her, to stay in denial, but deep down I knew I'd been living a lie. I'd trusted her with my life, my money, my heart, and she'd betrayed me in the worst way possible. I couldn't even process the shock properly. It was like waking up in a nightmare where everything I thought was real was just a facade. My mind kept racing, trying to understand how she could do this, how she could lie so effortlessly, how she could steal from us and then pretend to be the victim. The worst part was the betrayal of our shared dreams. We had plans, retiring early, traveling, building a life together. And now I was staring down the barrel of losing everything. Our savings, my inheritance, the house we were supposed to buy, and my marriage. I felt a mix of rage, sadness, and utter disbelief. How could someone I loved so much turn into this? How could she lie to my face, cheat behind my back, and then try to claim half of what we built? It was a slap in the face, a betrayal. So deep I didn't know if I'd ever recover from it. I knew I had to decide what to do next. But for now, I was just trying to keep it together, trying to breathe through the shock and the anger. I'd always believed in honesty, in loyalty. Turns out I was. I thought I knew my wife, but she was a stranger hiding behind a mask. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but everything pointed to one thing, had broken us apart, and I had to figure out how to fix myself now. After I found out everything, the affair, the money theft, the house she bought with Alex, I felt like my world was collapsing. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, her lies, the way she looked at me when she was trying to pretend she was innocent. It was like a punch to the gut every single time. I kept asking myself how I missed all the signs, how I let her get away with this for so long. I remember sitting on the edge of the bed one night, staring at the ceiling, trying to process what I'd uncovered. My mind was racing, spinning in circles. I kept thinking about the money, how she managed to steal $250, $0 without me noticing. That's a lot of money, more than I make in a year. It was supposed to be our safety net, our down payment on a house, a future. And she just took it, all of it, to buy a house with some guy she met cheating on me. That's when I realized I couldn't just brush this off as a stupid mistake or a moment of weakness. This was betrayal on a whole new level. I decided I had to confront her again. I couldn't just sit here and let her lie her way out of it. So I called her the next morning, told her I knew everything. Silence on the other end. Then she started lying again, saying she was sorry I found out this way, that she never meant for things to get so out of control. She told me she was just stressed, that the affair was just a mistake, and that the money was for their future, like that made it okay. She even had the nerve to say I was overreacting, that I was paranoid and insecure. That made me furious. I didn't even want to listen to her anymore. I told her I'd be coming home to talk face to face. When I got there, she tried to play the victim, crying, saying she was trapped, that she didn't know how to tell me. She said she loved me but was confused, and that she was just trying to find herself. Yeah, right. I looked at her, saw her bitchy, manipulative face, and realized I'd been a fool. I'd trusted her, believed in her, and she'd been lying the entire time. The confrontation was intense. I yelled, she yelled back. She kept insisting she was the victim, that I didn't understand her feelings, that she needed more from life. I told her she'd betrayed everything, our marriage, my trust, our future. She said I was controlling, that I didn't appreciate her. I couldn't believe her. She was trying to twist everything around, making me look like the bad guy. But I knew the truth. She was a liar, a thief, and a cheat. That night I felt a mix of rage and despair I'd never experienced before. My stomach was in knots and I was on the verge of losing it. I sat alone in the dark, replaying everything, her lies, her cheating, the stolen money. I felt like I'd been hit by a freight train. How could she do this? How could she look me in the eye and lie so effortlessly? I'd always been the guy who took care of everything, my family, our finances, our future. And now I was left with nothing but betrayal and heartbreak. The worst part was the sense of helplessness. I had no idea where to go from here. The money was gone. She was planning to fight for half of the inheritance that was supposed to be mine, my safety, my future. I felt like I was drowning in this mess, and I didn't know if I had the strength to fight back or if I should just walk away. Every part of me wanted to scream, to tear her apart for what she'd done, but I knew I had to keep my head clear. I needed to think fast. I started making a list of everything I knew, proof of her affair, bank statements, her texts with Alex, the house purchase. I wanted to be ready for whatever came next. I knew I had to protect what was left of my money, my inheritance, my sanity. I also realized I couldn't trust her anymore. She'd lied so much, manipulated every situation to her advantage. I couldn't let her steal more from me, not physically, not emotionally. I had to be smart, calculated. And so I started planning my next move. First, I was going to get a lawyer. I needed to understand my rights, especially since she was claiming half of the inheritance. I knew she'd try to manipulate the situation, spin it to her favor, but I had proof of the money theft, of her affair, of everything. I wasn't going down without a fight. Deep down, I knew I had to stand up for myself, for what was rightfully mine. I had to show her that I wasn't some naive fool anymore. I was done being played. In the back of my mind, I kept thinking about how this all started so simply. Just a good man, trying to build a life with the woman he loved. And now I was left with a broken marriage, a stolen fortune, and a girl who'd lied to my face. It's a harsh lesson in trust, I'll tell you that. Never again will I believe someone's words without proof. Never again will I ignore the small signs of betrayal. I've learned my lesson the hard way. After I gathered myself enough to start making serious moves, I knew I had to get a handle on the situation. I contacted a lawyer, a sharp guy named Mark who specialized in divorce and financial disputes. I laid everything out, her affair, the stolen money, her attempt to claim half of the inheritance. Mark was straightforward and told me I had a good case, especially since I had solid proof of the money theft. Still, he warned me, would probably fight dirty, try to spin things, and use her charm to manipulate the situation. I was prepared for that. While I waited for the legal process to kick in, I started digging even deeper into her financials. I hired a private investigator to track her movements, her contacts, and to confirm the house she bought with Alex was fully in her name. Turns out, she'd been planning this for months, maybe even longer. She hidden the house purchase in a different account, used fake documents, and even had a different phone number she kept secret from me. It was like discovering a whole new person, someone I barely recognized. I also started reviewing all our joint accounts and investments. I wanted to see if she'd siphoned more money or if there were other hidden assets. I found some small transfers here and there, but the $250, $0 was the most glaring. The house she bought was a luxury place in a nice neighborhood, and I knew it wasn't cheap. I felt sick knowing she'd used our shared funds for her betrayal. I was furious, but I also realized I needed to stay calm and strategic. Losing my temper wouldn't help me win this fight. Meanwhile, his attitude shifted. She became even more bitchy, trying to belittle me whenever she could. She'd call me paranoid, insecure, and accuse me of trying to control her. She claimed I was overreacting and that I was jealous of her happiness. Yeah, right. Her version of happiness involved screwing around behind my back, stealing from us, and lying through her teeth. I could see her trying to manipulate everyone, her friends, her family, even the lawyer trying to paint herself as the victim. But I knew better now. One day she had the nerve to tell me she was done fighting, that she wanted a divorce and that she'd be claiming her share of the inheritance soon. She said she deserved more because she was more than just a wife, that she'd been stuck in a boring marriage. That comment stung because I realized her whole plan was to walk away with a chunk of my inheritance, the house, and her new life with Alex. She didn't care about us, about what we built. She only cared about her own selfish desires. That's when I decided I'd had enough of her lies. I sat her down and told her that I had proof of her affair, proof of the stolen money, and that I wasn't going to let her walk away with everything. I told her I'd fight her in court, and I'd fight for what's rightfully mine. I also made it clear I was going to get a restraining order if she kept up her manipulative, bitchy attitude. I was done being her punching bag, but the most shocking thing happened. A few days later, I found out she'd been talking to her parents trying to spin her story. She told them I was abusive, that I was controlling, and that she was just trying to escape a bad marriage. Her parents, who I thought I knew, looked at me with suspicion. It hurt because I had always been respectful and kind to them, and now they saw me as some kind of villain. I felt betrayed all over again, not just but by her whole family. At that point, I realized I needed to be extra careful. Was good at lying, good at twisting things to her advantage. She'd probably try to turn everyone against me, make me look like the bad guy. That's why I started gathering all the evidence I could, screenshots, bank statements, texts, everything. I wanted to be prepared for whatever she threw my way. I also started talking with a financial advisor to see how I could protect the inheritance I was entitled to, especially with her trying to claim her share. The thing that kept me going was knowing I wasn't alone. I had friends who knew what was happening, and I had Mark, my lawyer, who was sharp and ruthless when it came to protecting his clients. I knew manipulations wouldn't work forever. I just had to stay patient, keep my head clear, and play it smart. I was determined not to let her walk away with my money, my future, or my dignity. The hardest part was facing the reality that the woman I loved had become someone I barely recognized, someone capable of lying, cheating, stealing, and trying to take everything I had. It's a brutal wake-up call. Trust is fragile, and I'd been naive to think I could ever truly know someone's intentions. Now, I had to rebuild my life from the ground up, with the scars of her betrayal etched deep. But I was also stronger than I thought. This fight isn't over, and I was ready to see it through to the end. After gathering all the evidence and lining up my legal strategy, I knew I had to confront again, this time with everything laid out on the table. I didn't want to do it impulsively, but I also couldn't keep waiting for her to spin more lies or manipulate the situation further. I scheduled a meeting with her lawyer, and I made sure I had all my proof organized, screenshots of her texts with Alex's bank statements showing the stolen money, the property records of the house she bought. I was ready for a fight, and I knew she was too. When she arrived at the lawyer's office, her face was a mask of disdain. She tried to act confident, bitchy even, like she had everything under control. But I could see the flicker of nervousness behind her eyes. She knew I wasn't going to let her walk away with everything. I laid out everything I had proof of her affair, the $250, $0 missing from our account, the house she bought with Alex. I told her I was filing for full custody of the money and that I'd be fighting her claim to half of the inheritance. Her reaction was classic. She started crying, fake tears welling up, claiming she was the victim, that I was harassing her, and that I was trying to ruin her life. She said she only wanted to be happy, that she was stressed, and that I'd always been controlling. I didn't buy her act for a second. I saw through her lies, and I made it clear I wasn't backing down. I told her she was going to lose everything if she kept playing these games. After the meeting, I felt a surge of relief mixed with anger. I knew I was finally taking control, but I also knew she wouldn't go down without a fight. That's when I decided to take more aggressive steps. I contacted the bank to freeze the account she had used for the stolen money, and I hired a forensic accountant to trace every dollar. I also started working on the divorce papers, making sure everything was airtight. I wasn't going to let her manipulate her way out of this. Meanwhile, bitchy's side only intensified. She started gaslighting me more, accusing me of trying to control her, sabotage her, and even trying to keep her from her happiness. She'd throw tantrums, slam doors, and even try to turn the kids against me. I have 2 kids and I love them more than anything, but it was clear was trying to manipulate everyone to her advantage. I stayed calm, focused on the legal process, and kept my emotions in check. I knew I'd need every ounce of strength to get through this. A particularly low moment was when she accused me of abusing her during the marriage, something that made my blood boil. I knew she'd try to paint me as the bad guy, but I also knew the truth. I never laid a hand on her, never raised my voice in anger, never did anything to harm her physically. If anything, I was the one trying to protect our family from her lies and manipulations. Still, her accusations hit hard because I knew how she'd spin it to her advantage. That's when I realized I had to be extra careful about my reputation, my image, and how I handled everything legally and emotionally. Throughout all this, I kept questioning myself. How did I miss all of this? How did I not see the signs? I knew deep down I'd been blinded by love, by the idea of a perfect life. But now, that illusion was shattered. I felt betrayed, angry, and exhausted. But I also felt a strange sense of clarity. I saw her for who she really was, someone willing to do whatever it took to get what she wanted, even if it meant destroying what we had. That realization pushed me to stay strong, to fight harder. I started reaching out to friends and family for support. Some told me to just walk away, that it wasn't worth it. Others advised me to fight for what's rightfully mine. I didn't want to be the guy who lost everything because of a cheating wife, but I also knew I had to protect my future, my kids, and my inheritance. I was determined not to let her manipulate me into giving up or settling for less. I had the evidence, I had the law on my side, and I had the motivation to see this through. Every day now feels like a battle. I wake up with a headache, go to bed exhausted, but I refuse to give up. I've learned a hard lesson about trust and betrayal. Never again will I ignore the small signs or dismiss my gut feelings. I've also learned that some people, especially those who are bitchy, manipulative, and selfish, will do anything to get what they want. The key is not to let them. I'm not just fighting for my money or my marriage, I'm fighting to reclaim my dignity and my future. And I'm not done yet. By the time I reached the fifth stage of this nightmare, I thought I was prepared for everything. I had my lawyer, all the evidence, and a clear plan to fight her attempts to claim half of my inheritance and keep her stolen money hidden. But true to form, surprised me again. She started playing dirty, using every trick in the book to turn people against me, to make herself look like the wronged wife, and to muddy the waters even more. She hired her own lawyer, a slick guy named Todd who specialized in manipulation and courtroom theatrics. Todd's first move was to gaslight the judge, playing up her victimhood, claiming I was harassing her and insisting that she was just trying to find happiness after a difficult marriage. It was all bullshit, of course, but she knew how to spin it. I watched her in court, acting like she was the one suffering, and I felt a mix of rage and helplessness. Meanwhile's bitchy attitude turned even nastier. She'd call me names, accuse me of being controlling, and say I was jealous of her freedom. She'd throw tantrums during depositions, slam her fists on the table, and try to cry her way out of the situation. I couldn't stand her acting like the innocent victim when I knew she was the mastermind behind all of this chaos. But I had to stay calm, keep my composure, and let the law do its job. One of the most shocking moments came when she tried to claim that I'd been physically abusive, something that made my blood boil. I had never laid a hand on her, never raised my voice in anger. I was the one trying to protect our family from her lies and manipulations. But she spun the story so convincingly that even some of her own family members started to doubt me. It was a gut punch, realizing how far she'd go to destroy my reputation. Her financial manipulations didn't stop there. She tried to argue that I'd been negligent with our money, that I'd failed to notice the theft of the $250, $0, and that I'd been an absentee husband. She claimed I was emotionally distant, that I was trying to control her, and that I didn't deserve the inheritance. It was classic projection. She was projecting her own guilt onto me while trying to paint herself as the victim. I knew I had to counter her lies with facts, with the truth, and with the evidence I'd collected. The court sessions were brutal. Every day's bitchy, manipulative side shined through. She'd smirk when I, roll her eyes when I made a point, and whisper to her lawyer. I could see her calculating her next move, trying to find a weakness in my case, but I was prepared. I had my lawyer cross-examine her, exposing her lies one by one, and I made sure the judge saw through her act. I was relentless in showing the court the proof of her affair, the stolen money, and her attempts to manipulate everyone involved. Throughout this chaos, I also kept tabs on her attempts to influence the kids. She'd tell them I was mean and controlling, trying to turn them against me. It hurt to see her poison their minds, but I stayed focused. I knew I had to protect my relationship with them, to show them the truth from my side. I spent extra time with them, explaining that sometimes adults lie and manipulate, but that I loved them and would always be there for them. I wanted them to see the real me, someone who was honest, caring, and committed. Deep down, I was exhausted. The emotional toll was heavy. I'd gone from being a happy, stable man to a man fighting for his very life. But I also felt a strange sense of clarity. I realized that I wasn't going to let her win. I had the law, I had proof, and I had the truth. I was starting to see how she was trying to manipulate everyone around her, including the court, but I was determined to stay one step ahead. I also started thinking about what I'd do after this was all over. I knew I'd never trust her again, and honestly, I didn't want to. I was tired of her bitchy attitude, her lies, her manipulations. I wanted peace, stability, and to rebuild my life. I was ready to move on, to start fresh, but first, I had to win this battle. I had to prove that I was the one who had been wronged, that her betrayal had consequences, and that she could just walk away with everything she wanted. Every day I spent in court, I learned more about her true nature. She was selfish, manipulative, and entirely self-absorbed. Her bitchy attitude masked a deep insecurity and greed. I'd been blind for too long, but now I saw her for what she was, a liar and a thief. I knew the final verdict was coming, and I was determined to come out on top, not just for the money, but for my dignity, my future, and the respect I deserved. I wasn't going to let her destroy everything I'd worked so hard for. Not now, not ever. The court date finally arrived, and I won't lie, it was the most intense day of my life. Everything I'd been fighting for, everything I'd uncovered, all the sleepless nights and anxiety, came down to that one moment. Sat there looking bitchy and entitled, trying to act like she was the victim, but I knew better. I had my proof, my lawyer had his arguments, and I was ready to put an end to her games. The judge listened carefully to both sides. I presented the bank statements, the house deeds, the texts, and the testimony from the private investigator. His lawyer tried to twist everything, to claim I was an unfit husband, that I'd been neglectful and controlling. But the judge saw through her lies. My evidence was solid, and her attempts to manipulate the court fell flat. When the judge finally ruled, it was like a huge weight lifted off my shoulders. The court awarded me full control of the inheritance, and she was ordered to return the stolen $250, $0 plus interest. The house she bought with Alex was awarded to me as part of the settlement, and she was any claim to our joint assets or future earnings. His bitchy smirk faded, replaced by a look of shock and anger. She tried to argue, to plead her case, but it was too late. The judge had spoken. In the aftermath, I felt a strange mix of relief and emptiness. I had fought hard and I'd won, but the damage was done. I was left with a broken marriage, a betrayal that cut deep, and a sense of betrayal that would take years to fully heal. The money was returned, the house was mine, and I had my dignity back, at least for now. But the real victory was reclaiming my life from her manipulations. I moved out of the house shortly after, not because I wanted to punish her, but because I couldn't stand to be there anymore, surrounded by all the lies and betrayal. I started over, focused on my kids, my work, and rebuilding what I'd lost. I cut ties with completely. It was painful, but I knew that staying connected to her would only drag me down. I learned that sometimes, the only way to truly heal is to walk away from the toxic, manipulative people who try to destroy you. Looking back, I realize how much I've grown through this. I learned not to ignore the small signs, not to trust blindly, and not to let anyone manipulate my life. I learned that betrayal cuts deep, but it also reveals your true strength. I've become more cautious, more resilient. I now know that I don't need a bitchy wife who cheats, steals, and manipulates to be happy. I can find happiness on my own with honesty, integrity, and respect. To anyone out there going through something similar, I'd say this: trust your instincts, gather your evidence, lean on your support system, and don't be afraid to fight for what's rightfully yours. People can be manipulative and selfish, but the truth always comes out in the end. Protect yourself, stand tall, and never let anyone take away your dignity. Because in the end, the only person responsible for your happiness is you. And I've learned the hard way that fighting for it is worth every ounce of pain you might endure.